Kia ora whānau and welcome to Around the Grounds, a podcast from New Zealand Rugby bringing you closer to our national game. Women's rugby continues to grow year on year. The game just isn't growing at the grassroots level, but there are more opportunities for our female players to become professional athletes and be involved in high performance programs. A part of this journey isn't just developing the skills of the game, but also understanding the female physiology, how it works in relation to playing and training for rugby. On Around the Grounds, we want to educate and inform our audience on women's menstrual health and how to best manage it in rugby. To talk more about this are a couple of very handy female athletes, founders of Femmi, Esther Keown and Lydia O'Donnell. Welcome to the podcast team.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, now am I right in saying that I've managed to get some of your time, but we've done this in your hometown, is that correct?
Correct, actually. We are here in Tauranga, where I grew up personally and where Esther is currently living.
And have you girls frequented the Mountain Rugby Club in the past? Is this a space you've been to before when you were younger ladies growing up in the area?
I've had a few nights at the Mountain Rugby Club for sure, but I haven't been here for a wee while.
Yeah.
My boyfriend actually played for the club, so
Yes.
Byron Smith used to play
awesome.
for this club. So yeah,
very
I've been here
good.
a few nights out as well.
Yeah, outstanding. Well, that's great. That's perfect. And Lydia, I know you're recently married, but I don't think you've seen your husband lately, have you? Have you been here since Christmas? You know, a great way to start the marriage is just to come home and stay here for a few months.
I know. I feel very guilty, but yeah, I've been here since pretty much the start of the year, in and out a little bit. He actually popped over. James was here last week and we did a 5-day trip around the South Island. So
Awesome. Okay.
we tried to kind of condense 5 months into 5 days, which was, it was nice. I mean, we couldn't complain. It was a pretty beautiful trip around New Zealand.
I like that. And you need to have these little litmus tests along the way, don't you? And I'm sure 5 days in a camper van or touring around or something's a good way to test whether you two are, still the ones for each other. And it sounds like you are. Look, guys, tell me a little bit about yourselves. Like, you're obviously from here, but, what's your sporting background? Talk us a little bit about, you guys growing up.
Yeah, so I obviously grew up here in Tauranga. I was definitely a pretty sporty kid. I kind of threw myself into every sport possible. I was actually growing up with Gemma McCaw, who is also incredibly sporty. She really
Very much
pushed me
so.
to my limits when I was a young kid. But yeah, just super competitive, I think, and really driven to succeed as a young girl growing up. And I found the sport of running quite young. I started doing athletics when I was like 7 years
Oh,
old
wow.
in
Okay.
Tauranga, and really just like loved the competitive element to it.
Yeah.
And I think I was kind of naturally built as a runner as a young girl as well. And thankfully, when I was about 11, 12 years old, I found an incredible woman coach here who was actually my high school PE teacher, Rosemary Wright, who was a Commonwealth Games champion.
Wow.
And she had the Commonwealth Games 800-meter record for a long time. And so
Awesome.
I found myself in a position where she was coaching me and she was very much like trying to teach me to enjoy sport as a young girl and just have fun with it. And she never put pressure on me to like run a certain time or train a certain amount. It was just like, go out and have fun with it and hang out with your friends more than anything, and kind of wait till you're a little bit older to put that pressure on and try and perform at that high performance level. And so I was just so lucky to have someone like that who really influenced me at a young age. And so I really loved high school and my running journey at school. We were like national champions as a team. So we always won gold medals, which was nice, but it was never individually.
Yeah.
And it just always made it so much more fun. So yeah, like growing up in Tauranga and having Rose as my coach, I was just like found myself to be like super, grateful to be in that position.
It's important, isn't it? You've got to have good role models. You've got to have good facilities. The track's down there. Like, it's a great environment to do that sport. So it sounds like your coach was hugely influential and a really positive influence as well. What about your journey?
Yeah, so I was brought up in Auckland, and similar to, I know, I live here now, it's way better, so don't worry. But yeah, I was similar to Liz, like just loved sport, loved being involved in sport. I had a pretty confident, like fearless attitude. I would always put myself right at the front of everything and
Yeah,
go as
rip
hard
in.
as humanly possible, and had no fear, which was really cool. So I was involved in every sport under the sun. I even played like lacrosse, which is extremely
yeah.
random.
Yeah.
Played touch rugby,
Cool.
not the contact one, but
Yeah.
I think I was too young for that anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just like loved playing sport, was super passionate about it. Realized that I was quite good at running and got much more involved in that at quite a young age, which is something that potentially I shouldn't have done. And the environment I was in wasn't as wholesome as Lydia's environment. It was a
Yeah.
lot of pressure on a young woman, and made me take things a lot too seriously at a young age. So yeah, that kind of changed my relationship with sport quite a bit. But overall, I love sport. I've loved it since I was really young. Uh, it's always been a big part of my life and driven a lot of what I do. But yeah, similar to Liz, just super confident, loved sport, wanted to be involved in everything, and hyper competitive.
We'll talk a bit about Femmi in a minute, but like, what was the discipline? Were we running marathons? Were we running 100 meters? Were we giving it all a crack? Like, what's like there's running. Is there's a lot of elements to running. There's a lot of different disciplines and events within running. None of them I'm particularly good at, but like, what was sort of your favoured distance or discipline, or what did you really get stuck into?
Oh, when I was at school, the longest we could really race at school was like 4Ks on the road.
Oh, yeah.
And then cross country was 3 to 4K, I think.
Mhm.
So those were like considered the longer distances at that age. And so that was very much like what I did was the
Yeah.
longer distances. I never was a sprinter. I just don't think I have those fast
Yeah.
twitch muscle fibers in my body. But
Yeah.
I was always drawn to the longer stuff. So for
Yeah.
me, it was like on the track, 1500, 3K, and then cross country and road was like 3 to 4K.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Cool.
Esther was much shorter and faster.
Esther,
Yeah.
could you go? You could go.
I feel like I have more than you, the fast twitch muscle fibers, but I'm still not like a 100-meter sprinter or
Right.
anything. I was 800, 1500 was kind of like my main disciplines.
Yeah, cool.
And I took that on into the senior level too.
Yeah.
So I've represented New Zealand in some of those distances
Oh,
as
wow.
well.
That's
Esther's
awesome.
very humble. She won world secondary school cross country champs when you were like 14.
Yeah,
15.
when I was little,
Holy hokanui.
a little
That's
queen.
awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't really talk about it that often. I should talk about it more. But yeah, went to like World Youths and World Juniors and stuff for New Zealand over the 800 and 1500.
Yeah,
But
wow.
yeah, I think now I'm definitely more of a distance woman. Like I like 5K and up and do like quite a lot of half marathons and 10Ks on the road. Sort of stepped away from the track. It's very high pressure. Some people absolutely love that, but I
Yeah.
think yeah,
It's pretty
I've done my
intense.
dash on the track.
And I'm sure we could do a whole nother podcast on that stuff, because I know you've done some of the biggest marathons in the world. You've done the New York Marathon. You like competed in some of those real signature events, and obviously you have as well. And going away and competing in worlds at a very young age, by the sounds of it, is some pretty awesome experiences. Tell us about Femmi. Like, how did this idea come about? What's it all about? Where did the name come from? Like, talk to us a little bit around. I mean, last time I saw you, Lyd, I don't believe the company Femmi existed, So,
No.
like, how did it all come about?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a whirlwind, to be honest. We've been in the world now for about just over 3.5 years. So it is still very early days.
Yeah.
But Femmi was very much founded off the back of me and Esther's lived experiences as female athletes.
Right.
So kind of going on from my high school experience and having this very like positive experience with my body and myself and my relationship to running, and obviously an amazing coach, I got kind of thrust into that more high performance
Yep.
system when I was about 19 years old. I won my first national title when I was 19, and
Yep.
that's when the pressure really kind of came on. And so the first like 5 to 6 years in my 20s, I spent under multiple different male coaches, and this is not a male only coach problem. This is
Yeah.
a systemic issue that exists that we're trying to fix at Femmi. But these coaches had no idea about female physiology. They were just
Yeah.
super uneducated when it came to women's bodies and also women's minds. The way that we
Yep.
think and process things is completely different to the way men do. And so my male coaches were putting a heap of pressure on me to mold my body and train a way that just didn't suit me. And
Yep.
I was constantly being told to lose weight as a young girl and,
Yep.
and a young woman, and being told that if I just lost a few kilos here and there, that
You'd run faster.
I'd run faster. And, scientifically, maybe that made sense in their mind, but the impact of the words that they had on me was incredibly negative. And I went through about 4 to 5 years of disordered eating and pretty challenging body image issues off the back of that experience. And I, as I mentioned, am a very competitive person, and I really respected my coaches. So
Yes.
I really believe that in order to get to where I wanted to go as a female athlete, I needed to do what my coaches were telling me. And so, yeah, I really restricted my diet. I was doing things that I know now are like positive signs that I had disordered eating, but
Right.
at the time I had no idea what I was actually doing, or that it was like negatively impacting my performance and my health as a woman. And so at about the age of 25, I completely lost my menstrual cycle. I fell into a state of relative energy deficiency syndrome in sport.
Wow.
Very long-winded name.
Yeah.
And essentially, your body goes into a low energy availability state if you're not fueling yourself correctly.
Right.
So, because I wasn't eating enough food, to put it in the most simple way,
And I would
and
say
then I was
some weeks doing 100 Ks or something.
160 Ks a week
Holy heck. Yeah.
and cutting out carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And because I thought that was going to help mold my body, it did not end well for me at all. So once I fell into low energy and I lost my period, I initially thought that was a really good thing because I had been told that if you don't have a period as a female athlete, that's really good. Like periods are a nuisance. This is what we were being fed
Wow.
by the media and by the sporting system and everything. Like
By the industry almost
by
sort
the
of thing, wasn't it?
industry,
Yeah.
periods are annoying, get rid of them. And so once I lost my period, I was like, pat myself on the back, like, that's awesome. You're doing all the right things. And then it was literally about 3 months later, I couldn't run at all because I had no energy.
Yeah.
And so that sent me down a path of about 2 years of like trying to learn about my body, and realized what I was doing to it to date wasn't working. Like my performance had plateaued, my health was crumbling. And so I spent, about 2 years just becoming educated.
Mm.
And
Because that's the question I was going to ask as you were going through all that is like, not only did your coaches, male or female, the sport, high performance sport, the industry wasn't aware of this, you weren't as well. You know, like
Totally.
you had no awareness, no education, no information to check yourself and say, you know, whether it be at the very end of the journey, losing your menstrual cycle,
Yeah.
but probably all these other things along the way. Probably just
Yeah.
thought you're low energy because you're training so hard and this is just what you have to do. But there's no checks and balances along the way, was there?
There was no education. There was no signs. I had plenty of physical signs that my body wasn't performing, or that my health was falling apart, but I paid no attention to them because I didn't think I needed to. But yeah, that what I found out about relative energy was that it was kind of an evolution of the female athlete triad, which is something that maybe people are more familiar with, which is kind of what Esther would have gone through. And I'll hand over to Esther in a minute to tell her story because it's very similar. But throughout her teenage years, the female athlete triad was kind of all we knew. And the female athlete triad is women who suffer eating disorders, have menstrual cycle dysfunction or lose their periods, and then have bone stress issues or injuries.
Okay.
And those are kind of the three things that were intertwined that was quite well known in the sport of running. But because I didn't think I had an eating disorder,
Yeah.
and it wasn't until I lost my period that I realized that there is so much more to it. But when Esther was like 14, 15 and went through what was known back then as the female athlete triad, there was still no support for her.
Yeah.
Tell us, Esther. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been cool to see the change, and it's now called REDS. So Lids said the whole long name before. I won't repeat it, but they realized that it can happen to men and people of all genders.
Right.
So it's not just like a female only issue.
Yeah.
And it really is linked to low energy availability and also like high stress levels. So the stress that you're put under from maybe work or
Yeah.
probably training
Yeah.
and not eating enough. So yeah, it's been a great change to include, everyone that it is impacted by it. But yeah, for me, my story is similar to Lid's, but I was sort of placed under a male coach when I was 13 years old, and I was quite good at running and I was winning school cross countries and doing quite well. And so I reached out to a coach, and we went to a coach that had won an Olympic bronze medal. So who better to coach me than someone who'd done that?
Yeah.
And that's something that I wanted to achieve as a senior athlete. I wanted to go to the Olympics. So obviously I really wanted to be in that environment, but he was very old school mindset, like mileage, mileage, mileage. I think I was running between 80 and 100 Ks a week at the age of 14 once I'd gone under him. And so, yeah, my body just really struggled. And he also put a lot of pressure on us, even at a young age, to look like a runner.
Yeah.
So, like, the leaner, the skinnier we were, the better we would be. And so, kept hearing these messages, obviously wanted to be the best in the world. And so, I just started to take action around my food. And so, in the meantime, I'd obviously won World Secondary School cross country champs, but like while I was there, I had anorexia, and like the
Right.
years leading up to that, I had developed anorexia. So, yeah, I was really unwell towards food, and yeah, from there, I was lucky enough to get help and get my menstrual cycle back. So I'd lost my period during that time as well, and one of the things that come with REDS is bone stress injuries, as Liz mentioned. So I had a few stress fractures, and they're quite
Yeah.
obvious signs that something's going on. Like estrogen and progesterone are super important to build bone strength.
Okay.
And when your menstrual cycle stops, you're not really producing them anymore.
Right.
So that's why you can get like stress fractures, basically. From there, yeah, I was lucky enough to get help, like I mentioned, and get better. But I'd lost my passion for sport at that point. I'd sort of gone through so many issues with it, my health, lost a lot of confidence because when I went and got help, I put on weight, went to see a nutritionist, had to come through that whole eating disorder out to the other side, and my performance plummeted again. So there is a dip in performance for young girls when they go through puberty, and that's well known.
Yeah.
But for me, I didn't know that. The education wasn't there. I didn't realize that that's normal. So as my performance dropped, as I put on weight, went through puberty again, I just thought that I was, terrible at running, basically. So from there, I gave up running at the age of 18. So I tried to sort of keep involved, but yeah, I didn't really enjoy it anymore. The other thing was I was a carded athlete under High Performance Sport New Zealand, and they never mentioned menstrual cycles to me. And I'm clearly, going through that time in my life. So it's just a whole systemic issue. Like we're not taught about it enough at school. The sporting bodies don't know enough about it. It's definitely changing, which is really awesome. But yeah, there's a long way to go still. But I think both of our stories is why Femmi was created.
Yeah,
Definitely.
totally. And it's like we're obviously talking about the menstrual cycle, but running 100 Ks when you're 14 and being told you need to look a certain way, which is a stereotypical body shape for a runner or an athlete. I mean, all of those things seems like we can do a lot of work on that stuff, can't we? Like, I can just imagine that, obviously hearing things from people that have a lot of credibility in the sense they've been good athletes themselves and they're mentors to you and they're putting a lot of time into you, I can see why they would be really influential. But also, I can imagine too, a young person doing that much training, by the time you get to 16, 17, 18, you might just be a little bit sick of it as well. Like, you've got to sort of get the balance right as well, don't you?
Yeah, well, like girls and women are dropping out at 2 times the rate, dropping out of sport at 2 times the rate of boys and men.
Is that
And
right?
like,
And some boys are dropping out too. So that's it's a
yeah.
really alarming stat.
And everything we speak to are like massive reasons to why girls are stopping sport.
Yeah.
They're just not being supported and not being educated. And when they have that dip in performance, no matter what sport they're playing, a lot of girls tend to steer away from sport because they don't want to look weak or like they've lost their performance or lost their power. And
Yeah.
so just like educating girls that happens and it's normal and it will just take a bit of time to come back. That's so fine. Just be patient with your body. Like those are the things I wish that Esther had heard when she was a young girl.
So let's go backwards a little bit, almost from the start. Like, if you're a young person and you're having your period, like, what are the effects? Like, what's going to happen? Like whether it be yourself as a young athlete, what are you looking out for? Maybe as a coach as well, and then collectively, how do we manage that? Like at the really early onset of a young athlete and their menstrual cycle.
Yeah, well, essentially, when girls are going through puberty or going through menses and their cycles are starting, they aren't going to be super regular. So it takes sometimes years for young girls to have regular menstrual cycles and
Right.
regular periods. And throughout this time, a young woman's hormones are completely shifting and completely
Yeah.
changing. And because of the changes in her hormones, the way that she feels and the way that she's able to reach intensities in training, the way she can respond to training, the way she can recover from training can completely differ throughout those periods of her life. And so all of that has impacts on the way that she is like actually executing her training. And training obviously is how she can perform on race day or game day, and like all of that is so important to understand so that you can take that approach of how can we allow you to be the best you today,
Mm.
and we know in another 6 months, 12 months, 24 months it might be, you're going to be an amazing athlete, but like we just want to support you through that journey the best that we can. Because the biggest thing that I think gets impacted through these shifts when people aren't educated around you is your confidence can drop so much. And we know as women, like confidence is so important because we don't traditionally, women don't innately have the confidence that men carry. And so just like growing that confidence with her and holding her hand through that journey is like one of the most important things to like keep her in the sport.
I think I'll just add to that as well that like a couple of things to look out for as a coach is if a young girl's cycle comes and then disappears for over 3 months, that's when you sort of seek some medical help. And then also if a period hasn't started by the age of 15, going to see a doctor that sort of specializes in
Yeah.
women's health. I think it's really important to find the right doctor. Don't just go to a doctor that puts you on the pill.
Yeah.
And that we know now that that actually masks the fact that your cycle's gone missing. So it doesn't really protect bones and it doesn't do a lot for actually addressing the problem that's happening. So I think just those two things, if you're a coach and you're coaching young women, if it disappears for over 3 months,
Mm.
maybe seek some medical help with a really awesome women's health professional. And then if it's not there by 15 as well.
So what when you're a young athlete, is it about understanding it, recording it, starting to see what the frequency is, seeing how, and then if being brave, talking to your coach, like and if you're a coach, giving that space and that opportunity to have open dialogue, are these all things that we need to integrate into taking not just a 12, 13, 14-year-old, but, Colts teams and 21, 22, 23-year-old when, our expectation around performance grows, gets higher? Like, is it writing it down? Is it an app? Is it creating a space within, a training schedule to say checking in and actually having that as a topic of conversation, normalizing it, like so that to your point, you're not, girls are not reserved or shy or unconfident being able to raise that, or having the confidence to say if it's happening during a training week or a match, you can say that,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one of the most important things that all women can do, and girls, even as soon as they get their first period, is start tracking your cycle
Right.
and understanding the regularities in your cycle. So we've actually spent the last 2 years developing a tracking app called
Oh,
Femmi,
sweet. Yeah.
which you can download in the App Store, just a shameless plug there.
Go
You
for
can
it.
actually track your menstrual cycle and then get running guidance that's built
Right.
around your cycle. But tracking, like if I tracked my cycle in my early 20s while I was going through all of those challenges, I would have been able to pick up pretty quickly that there was something that wasn't quite right,
Right.
because I would have seen irregularities within my cycle before I completely lost it. So
Right.
going from, say, a traditional 28-day cycle, it might have become a 35-day cycle and then a 45-day cycle, and then it could have completely disappeared. And those are red flags to say
Yeah.
something isn't right. Like you need to assess what's going on in terms of nutrition and fuel and training. But I didn't do that. So I didn't know anything about tracking my cycle.
And is that the reason for that is either you weren't educated to keep an eye on it, or you were so eye on the prize, like in terms of running a certain time, getting your Ks up, being a certain body shape, that was in your periphery. That just wasn't
Yeah.
something that you were
I just
focused.
wasn't educated. I
Yeah.
think if someone has said to me, you need to pay attention to your cycle, and the best thing you can do is track your cycle, and that's actually going to allow you to perform better as an athlete, I would have 100% done that.
Yeah.
But no one said it. So
Yeah.
I think that is the biggest thing. And then on the education front, I'll throw to Esther chat through Femmi Theory, which is really exciting, being in partnership with NZ Rugby and
Yeah.
getting this education and bringing it to the forefront of like coaches and trainers and even parents to understand how they can even just like speak to their women athletes or girl athletes better, to encourage them to like look out for signs around their health and grow confidence in themselves as well.
Yeah, I'll talk about Femmi theory now. So
100%.
Femmi theory was something that we started doing. I don't even remember how long ago that was now.
2022.
2022
Mm.
is when it launched.
Yep.
Yeah, so we worked on it for like a year and a half prior to that. And it's basically an online education course that looks into female physiology and female psychology. So we have a team of medical experts on board at Femmi who helped us build this course out. It's all pre-recorded online, 5
Yep.
to 15-minute videos,
Awesome.
different modules, and you do a little quiz at the end, and you also have a workbook. So it's very deep. It goes deep into like different life stages of women. So,
Yep.
you know, puberty all the way up to menopause, pregnancy, things to consider there. And then it goes obviously into the psychology piece as well and how best to like have these conversations. I think the question that you asked before is really important. And like, how can we create these environments where there's less stigma around periods and talking about them and menstrual cycles? And I think it literally is just taking that first step as a coach. Whether you're coaching young girls, it might be talking to the parents first and
Yep.
saying, this is something I want to start doing. Are you okay with it? Would you like to come along
Yes.
with me and let's start introducing these conversations? Because I think even talking to young girls these days, there is still shame and it's still
Yep.
something that's quite embarrassing. So we really need to change that narrative. And I think coaches, it's a responsibility of coaches to start creating that environment where they feel safe enough to bring it up. And, you know, women as well in team environments, starting to have those conversations within the team. And I guarantee a lot of them already are having
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
conversations. It's just starting to open up those lines of communication. But we have all, you know, all of this in Femmi theory. We have ways to bring these topics up in really safe environments for everyone. And at the end of the day, if we're all trying to achieve better performance, how are we going to not talk about something that literally impacts performance? You know,
Totally.
day to day, we feel different. Our hormones are changing. If we ignore this thing and we don't talk about it, we're missing out on performance gains that we could be, you know,
Yeah.
adapting our training to and performing at a higher level. So I think if you look at it from that perspective and like the performance lens, this is something coaches should be doing.
Yeah, and we like built Femmi theory because of the experiences that we had and our
Yeah.
coaches not knowing enough about female physiology. And again, it comes down to confidence. Like the coaches just don't really have the confidence to speak about these topics. So we wanted to bring that education and put it in the hands of the coaches and trainers and parents so that they actually have the confidence to open up these conversations too.
I think just on that as well, I'm pretty sure High Performance Sport New Zealand has some things in place now where they check in with the elite athletes that their cycles are continually regular.
Yep.
And if they're not, they address their nutrition and address their training level. So they actually are literally checking in cycle to cycle. And I think that's like a pretty powerful place to
Totally.
start because you start to notice changes, like Liz said, because it doesn't just go one day where you have a cycle and then it disappears.
Yeah.
There are signs leading
Yeah.
up to that point, and it takes a little bit of time for it to completely disappear. So if you are watching that, you can actually catch on quicker and do something about it.
Oh, awesome. Let's talk a little bit specifically about rugby. You know, like running and rugby are quite different, same but different. But like rugby's a contact sport. You know, there's sometimes a few urban myths that playing a contact sport is the physicality of it's bad for your menstrual cycle. Like, is that the case, or no? It's more to do with, you know, like you say, the recording, your diet, how much activity you're actually doing. You know, like how does it some of the stuff that you guys work on day in day out, like relate to rugby, or for female people who are listening who play rugby, what's some of the things that they should really look out for?
Yeah.
I think it's just about stress on the body and like learning about, you know, that LEA, like energy availability. That's one piece of the puzzle, but it's also basically that's just stress. And
Yep.
there's multiple ways that someone can be stressed. It might be that they're also studying for uni or they're in a contact sport like rugby and they're putting a lot of stress on their body every day. So I think factoring in the fact that your body is under a lot of stress and getting the right nutritional help around that to make sure that you're meeting that energy availability. But those are myths about contact sport.
Yeah.
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 I feel like maybe just to kind of set the scene is to understand the menstrual cycle a little bit better.
Yeah.
So if you'd like, we can go into the kind of ins and outs in a
Do
very
it.
simple way
Do it.
to understand the menstrual cycle, and then we can talk like our approach at Femmi is not a generic approach. Like we can't just say the way that we approach training for me is going to work the same that it is going to be for Est. And when it comes to rugby players, you can't really just put this like blanket approach to all of your players and say that's going to be
Yeah.
appropriate because everybody has their own experience with their menstrual cycle and we're all affected
And that's sport,
differently.
isn't it? Like that's any
Totally.
sport. grassroots sport, high performance sport. It's not,
Yes.
one size fits all. And if we view it through that lens, it's the
Yes.
same thing. It's
Well,
the
we
same
say
approach.
one size fits men, but that does not work for
Well,
women.
hang on, Lid.
So, well, we'll get into the menstrual cycle. So we talk to the menstrual cycle as a 28-day cycle because it's easy to understand because it's 4 weeks, but
Yep.
everyone is different. And a normal menstrual cycle is anything from like 21 days to 40 days is kind of
Right.
considered normal. But for the sake of explaining it, we'll talk to that 28-day cycle. So the cycle is broken down into 2 major phases, the follicular phase and the luteal phase. The follicular phase is the first phase of the cycle, which happens from menstruation, which is when your first day of your period, and then you go through to ovulation, and then the second half of the phase is the luteal phase. So during the follicular phase, which is the first half of the cycle, it is dominated by the hormone estrogen. So at the start of your cycle, when you have your period, both estrogen and progesterone are really low, pretty much flatlined, and they continue to stay so until once your period stops and then estrogen begins to rise. Estrogen then peaks at ovulation and drops off. The follicular phase is kind of in a more generic, we hate using this approach, but in a generic sense, the high energy phase, because estrogen can be really beneficial for us in training. It can help us reach intensities in training a lot
Right.
easier. It can help us recover a lot easier from training.
Yep.
So generally, we say during the follicular phase, most women, not everyone, but most women can train a little bit harder.
Wow.
When we move into the luteal phase, that is dominated by a hormone called progesterone. Progesterone is incredibly important for our health as women, but it can have some more, if you want to call them negative effects to how we feel.
Okay.
So kind of opposite to estrogen. It can like prohibit us from reaching intensities as easier,
Okay.
and it can impact things like sleep, which is obviously really important when it comes to recovery. So during our luteal phase, where estrogen is predominant, we tend to say pull the intensity of training back if you're
Okay.
affected by that rise of estrogen before it drops off, and then
Progesterone.
and then we go into the follicular phase again. So that is kind of like a very simple
Yeah.
2-minute version of how the menstrual cycle works.
Oh.
But what you need to know, I guess, is that our hormones are shifting every single day.
Yeah.
Our hormones are constantly changing. For people who have natural menstrual cycles, obviously people on contraception or pregnancy,
Yes.
other things like that impacts how those hormones are changing. But for someone who has a natural menstrual cycle, our hormones are shifting. And that is just like such an obvious thing for us to say, like, if your body is changing, your physiology is changing, you need to change the way that you approach
Yeah.
your physical performance, your physical training as well. So yeah, that's a really simple way of explaining the cycle. And then the way that you train individually is very much around how you are impacted by those hormones. So in rugby, like obviously in a team environment, it is harder because you have to take into account what everyone else is doing in
Yeah.
the team as well. But if you can take that individualized approach to each player and make sure that she is doing and looking after herself the way that she needs to be, then you're going to get the most out of her as a player. There's a really great example, which I might throw to Esther chat through, the US soccer team.
Right.
They were kind of like the first in the world to kind of take this approach to their team environment, and it worked really well for them.
Yeah, I'll touch on that.
Yeah.
So the US women's soccer team started to notice that some of their players were like impacted quite a lot by their cycle. So, the science says that most women feel the worst right before they get their period again. So, because progesterone and estrogen are quite high and then they drop away. So, it's this massive change in hormones. So, it clearly is going to impact people. And so, they were noticing like some players were impacted a lot more throughout their cycle and predominantly around that time in their cycle. And they couldn't perform at the same level as they could at other points in their cycle.
Right.
And so they took this really individualized approach, finding out by tracking who is the most impacted, what days are they the most impacted, how are they feeling, and then they started to adapt it with like nutrition and mitigation strategies. So there is some research out there about like adding magnesium and omega-3 when you're on your period, and that can help with cramps. And like there is some nutritional mitigation strategies that you can implement. And so what they did was they worked with like a very well educated
Yeah.
sports scientist who's done a lot of research into the women's menstrual cycle, and they basically started to implement those strategies with those players. And so they would be on camps together and they would leave post-it notes on their doors being like, remember to have these supplements today,
Yeah.
or remember to do X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
And what they started to see was that their performance started to level out throughout their cycle. And so
Right. Not have the spikes,
not have the
the
spikes.
better
Yeah,
managing.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the players were able to perform any day of the cycle and perform at a really good level. So I think that's one of the coolest things about like tracking your cycle is like if you didn't do that, you would have these ups and downs and be like, what's wrong with me?
Yes.
Like, why do I feel so horrible today and then feel awesome next week? Like, have I lost fitness? Or,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
almost feel your confidence drop in yourself. But by tracking, understanding how you feel, you can actually adapt like what you do at certain times and you can start to level out your cycle and your performance throughout. So they're obviously a very successful soccer team. The last World Cup wouldn't say so much,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they are, you know,
Top draw. Yeah.
overall, they
Yeah.
are one of the best in history in women's soccer. So it really had positive effects on their team and their performance.
And I suppose too, because we're obviously talking at the highest of high performance environments there with good resources and specialists, but, and I'm sure you guys have done this as well, is the lesson there a little bit is like, you're not going to get that right straight away. Like you trial and error, don't you? You're like, well, like I'm going to train this way this time. I'm going to have this bit of tucker this time, this supplement, whatever it be. And you keep playing around with it until you get it right. Like all other aspects of high performance, you know, you play around with your training schedules and how you do things, how you lead into a race, how you lead into a match, and you refine and you know, try and get it better and better every time. And I assume it's the same with the menstrual cycle as well. Look, guys, tell us a little bit. It blows me away a little bit, really, to be honest, how little we knew about this or talked about it or informed our female athletes about this 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Like it's you know, it's amazing, really. So it's awesome the work you're doing. Like, so you're working with New Zealand Rugby. Who else are you working with? Like, what's the sort of stuff that you're doing? Like, and also, obviously, some of those environments are high performance environments. They're athletes who are a part of programs and they have people around them. But also, what's the message or how can your platform and your information help people who are just getting started as well, like our female athletes who are just getting started? Because one thing certainly with rugby is, yep, we have some young girls who are getting into it and they're coming into professional and semi-professional environments in 7s and 15s. Sometimes they're entering when they're 14, 15, 16, 17. Sometimes it's later. You know, we have a lot of females who are getting into rugby and club rugby when they're 25, 30, you know, like, so, you know, what sort of stuff do you have available that they can tap into as well?
I can touch on the partnerships and then, yeah, you go from there. So, yeah, we partner with NZ Rugby. So, all the management of Black Ferns and Black Fern Sevens have been through our course,
Awesome.
which is awesome. And we also partner with Athletics New Zealand. So,
Right.
yeah, they're putting all the accredited coaches as a mandatory course through Femmi Theory, which is awesome because Loads and I, you know, we have been runners our whole life. So,
Yes,
to
bit of
get
passion
into
there. Yeah.
Athletics New Zealand was
Yeah.
like a big day for us. I cried when that happened. But yeah, just to know that that change is probably coming because of that is really awesome. So those are some of the partnerships, and I hand it over to you for like how you can do that as just someone who's training and potentially not that high performance level.
Yeah, so we have Femmi Theory, as Es mentioned, which is
Yep.
our online course. We have the full version, which is 8+ hours of online learning that you can go through at your own time. It's all like pre-recorded content, and you walk away with a workbook with all of the content written
Yep.
down as well. We actually have a shorter version of Femmi Theory too, which is only 3 hours. So we stripped some of like the
Right.
some of the modules out of the course, like menopause, things that maybe if you're just coaching young girls,
Yep.
it was maybe irrelevant to you. So
Okay.
that course is also just like, there is so much goodness and information in that course, and nothing like it exists anywhere else. So like, we're incredibly proud of that course.
Totally.
And to see NZ Rugby and to see Athletics New Zealand getting behind it and spreading that education is like, it's our life's work, what we're doing. And so to see these, you know, organizations get behind it and actually push it out, we truly feel like we're making change, which is awesome. And then, like I mentioned, we've spent the last 2 years developing an app, which has been a wild time. Building a tech company is not something we probably either of us imagined we would do in our lives, but it has been really interesting. We've learned so much about tech, but also just about business. And we're in the startup world trying to raise money. So that's like a whole nother beast. So our app is a menstrual cycle tracking app where you can get training guidance that is built around your female physiology. We launched into the App Store in October last year, November,
good.
which was awesome. But the thing with tech is that you don't just let it into the world and it just...
You got to keep going,
Yeah, you've got to be on it every
Yeah.
day. So
Yeah.
we have a full-time team that is constantly working on the product, and we have just like so many really exciting ideas that we want to build into the app. And so right now it's very much a app for women runners.
Yeah.
But people who play other sports like rugby could benefit off it so well, because obviously running is a massive component to
Totally.
playing rugby. And so we have been seeing women of other sports come and use the platform and use the app as well, which is awesome. But we do eventually want to build the app into a place of all forms of movement and all life stages for women to come and use as well. So we've got some pretty exciting times coming up, but it has been a massive hustle over the last couple of years. But it's just like so rewarding for us when we meet women who are part of our Femmi community or using the app or have gone through Femmi theory, and to hear the change we've made in their lives is just like incredibly rewarding for us, because at the end of the day, our goal is to keep women moving and we want to empower women through movement. And if we can allow women to have a really sustainable, healthy relationship with sport, then our job is done. So,
And just on that as well, since doing that and changing our training and actually having a sustainable relationship with sport, both Lids and I have run the best we've ever run in our lives and
There you go.
smashed all our PBs and performed better. It's not like we're sacrificing performance by being
looking after
healthy.
ourselves.
It's
Proof's in the
actually,
pudding, isn't it? You know, it is.
it's working. So,
Yeah. That's all. Look, well done, girls. As I said, there's clearly a need for this, and you are working very, very hard on providing that need, which is awesome. So we can get it in the App Store. We can get it on, if we go look for Femmi online at Google, we'll find the site with all the modules and that you're talking about. So we can go.
Yeah, we can send you all the links so you can pop it in the show notes.
Happy to do that. Please do that. But no, well done. And look, you did right. Overall, if the goal is to keep more young ladies, or not just young ladies, but any females in sport enjoying it for longer, we're winning, aren't we? So good on you. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for coming in today, and good luck now that you are startup business people, out there having probably to pitch and get funding, and probably going for a run is sometimes the happy place where you get to take a little bit of weight off the shoulders in between these transactions. But good on you. I really appreciate you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.